So for our first California-themed release, we went just outside our backyard, just off the coast, to a place with some of the biggest waves and most extreme surfing in all of North America, OS X Mavericks. You may remember that we were able to deftly shift from names based on big cats to names based on beautiful places in California, starting, of course, with OS X Mavericks. Well, it's another year and time for another name. And so we collected our crack product marketing team, shoved them in their VW minibus, and set them out on the road. Now, they first ventured south, discovering OS X Oxnard. Now, this wasn't quite right, but undeterred, they headed east, landing at OS X Rancho Cucamonga. Still, we hadn't quite hit the mark, so they boldly ventured north, landing at OS X Weed. Now, strangely, this one had large pockets of support within the product marketing organization. But saner heads did prevail, and they set off on what then was a somewhat more circuitous path that took them ultimately to a place that embodies the beauty and power of OS X. We discovered OS X Yosemite. Our next big release of OS X, we knew we wanted to build on those strengths of Yosemite with some really great refinements and advances. The only really real question, of course, was what to call it. So we had to once again turn to our crack Apple marketing team. Now, in typical California fashion, they started with a project kickoff meeting and then headed immediately into a team-building offsite. Now, of course, they're in their traditional Apple marketing Free Bottom Fridays attire. They say it's all part of their process. I'm not sure I get it. Ultimately, this didn't yield any names, so they called in a consultant. He told them the answer was to be found within. Not within themselves, but within Yosemite. And so the new name for OS X is OS X El Capitan. To talk to you about OS X. And of course, no presentation at WWDC about OS X would be complete without some kind of naming controversy. Now, I'm not talking about some allegedly baked members of our marketing team going on some kind of vision quest around California looking for a special name. I'm actually talking about the name OS X itself. You know, OS X has been with us as a name for over 15 years, and it served us so well. But as we look at it alongside its younger brethren, something sticks out. We realize that there's a name that would be so much clearer and so much more elegant. And so, we're making it so. The name of the world's most advanced desktop operating system is now Mac OS. Now, of course, each version of Mac OS does have a special name after a place that's especially important to us here in California. And this year's Mac OS is no different. But the choice this time was obvious. Our latest, newest OS X is Mac OS Sierra. But of course, the question is, what do we call it? So we enlisted once again our crack marketing team. They were giddy to hop in their minibus and this time venture east, deep into the Sierras, but this time ascending its highest peaks. And when they finally came back, they had a name they said felt really, really good, and it's my privilege to announce for you today, Mac OS High Sierra. Our naming of Mac releases is handled by our crack marketing organization. And As you probably noticed, they went on a 4-year mountain-bound bender. In El Capitan, we added Metal, our groundbreaking graphics technology. In Sierra, we brought Siri to the Mac and extended our capabilities and continuity. And last year, with High Sierra, we focused on deep technology, preparing the Mac for future innovation. Well, this year, we've made some striking changes to macOS, and we've left the high country for a place entirely different but no less beautiful here still in California. And I'd like to take you there now. Our next release of macOS is macOS Mojave. So for our next major release of macOS, we're moving out of the desert into the beautiful waters off the California coast, a place for sailing, diving, and so much more. It's macOS Catalina. But what should we call it? Well, if you're a student of macOS, you know this question can only be answered by Apple's legendary crack marketing team. Their drug-fueled, minibus-driven vision quests have yielded some great names and sadly spawned a host of imitators. The truth is, we can't responsibly continue to inadvertently lead our competition to copy these methods when they clearly can't handle the trip. So this year, we're leaving our process shrouded in mystery and taking you straight to the glorious destination. Our next release of macOS is macOS Big Sur. But what should we call it? Well, that brings us to the latest exploits of our crack marketing team. With their annual vision quest postponed, our merry band of nomadic namers wandered aimlessly through the California hills before donning their technicolored wetsuits and immersing themselves in the inspiration of the beautiful rich waters of Monterey. So what should we call it? Well, that brings us to the latest exploits of Apple's crack product marketing team. They've been absolutely riding high since their naming coup on M1 and M2. And needless to say, they were exhausted. But after their requisite 3-month rejuvenation retreat in Monterey, with their chakras now in complete alignment, the team once again piled into their macOS naming microbus and wove their way down Highway 1. Chasing the vibrant display of colorful California wildflowers, they finally came to rest where stunning surf meets lush alluvial plains in beautiful Ventura. Now, when it came to naming this release, we turned once again to Apple's legendary crack product marketing team. The instructions were simple and explicit. Travel far and wide, leave no stone unturned. Well, as far as we can reconstruct, that search consisted of piling in their microbus, punching in the words "awesome vineyard" into maps, and beelining straight to one of the most famous wine regions in the world. A place celebrated by the team, perhaps a bit too much, and beloved by millions. Introducing macOS Sonoma. But what should we call it? Well, that brings us once again to the annual escapades of our legendary crack marketing team. Distracted briefly from their marathon hacky sack session, they stumbled into their minibus and wove a trail toward the Sierras, eventually rolling to a stop in a beautiful national park. Staring skyward up the towering trunks surrounding them, they felt a deep kinship with anything that could get that high. They knew they'd found their spot. Welcome to macOS Sequoia,